Okay, welcome back. Okay, feel free to come forward. There are still many seats in the tables in front. Okay, so we'll continue with our track on cold chain. So in the second part of this track, we will have one presentation as well as one panel session. And both of these are focused on the topic of clinical trials. Okay. Next up, we have from Zulik Pharma, Giuseppe Liu. I hope I got the name correct. He's a senior VP at a clinical reach business unit. So prior to this, he was the SVP covering North Asia, Singapore, as well as Specialty Solutions Group, a division of Zulik Pharma that he founded in 2009. So he has more than 30 years experience in the logistics industry, out of which 12 were with TNT Express worldwide in the UK and Asia. His last 20 years have been focused in healthcare and clinical trial logistics. Lots of experience there. And on top of that, he spent the last 28 years of his career in Asia. So without further ado, let's welcome Giuseppe.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for... Can you hear me okay? It's good? Good. Thanks for inviting me here to talk about clinical trials. Considering all the years that were mentioned about the amount of time I've spent in the industry and in Asia, I should be pretty much on my way out, which I probably am very soon. But I hope I got enough information to share with you still of something a little bit interesting. I'll give you a quick intro on Zulik, but I just noticed when I arrived that my colleague spoke just before the break, so I'm sure he probably did that, so I won't spend a lot of time there. I'm going to be talking about innovations in clinical trials. There's a lot going on in the industry right now, but more importantly then, I suppose what I'll zoom in on is what I believe is this very specific issue within the industry, and not just the clinical trial industry, but the clinical trial industry specifically is quite acute because of the nature of the work. And maybe what we can do, what needs to be done to really solve a very large and forward-looking problem that will exist. So without further, here we go. So, as I say, I'm sure you've probably seen this, Zulik Pharma. We celebrated 100 years last year. It's an Asian business predominantly, apart from my business unit that is also established on a global basis. 16,000 people, $16 billion of turnover. A sizable organization, but zooming in, my business unit of Clinical Reach is a significantly smaller unit that focuses on a very specialized service. And Zulik Pharma is a very broad animal now, doing distribution, sales and marketing, patient programs, third-party administration, and clinical trials is really just one small part of it. We have 17 depots globally, only just over 200 people, although we are growing quite quickly at the moment. But the number of projects that we've done is quite sizable. We've been in the business for probably 15 years, and 5,500 studies is a lot to manage in that time. But it's growing, and the industry here in Asia is growing very specifically. I saw some stats recently. So during COVID, obviously with the restrictions on transportation, a lot of studies were being conducted domestically, specifically in the US and Europe, which makes a lot of sense. They don't know whether they can get into hospitals in Asia or South America or Eastern Europe. So they sort of, regressed and looked at how in areas that they could control the studies. Having said that, though, coming out of COVID, the US is saturated. There's really not much capacity to grow there. And a lot of the new work last year, it was being pushed out into Asia as Asia opened quite quickly and widespread. a lot of studies were directed in this region. So that's a very positive thing for the region, and also for the development of this industry in this region. Our service is end-to-end. We do sourcing, packaging, secondary packaging, labeling. Then we do the storage and distribution, and then the return and destruction. So it's all in. But the major thing here is always information. And this is a theme that I emphasize here because it is something that I believe is very, very specific to the challenges that we face in this industry going forward. So one of the major innovations that's been happening, and not only in clinical trials, in healthcare and in all industries, is sustainability and environmental improvements. This is a huge factor, and more of the pharmaceutical companies that we work with are making it very, very clear that in 3 to 5 years' time, this will be a deal breaker. This is a baseline introduction to doing business with them as a company. If you don't meet certain standards, you won't even be sent the tender documents to apply to. So this is a really big area, but I'm very pleased to say, and certainly in Zulig, but I think across the industry, that massive strides are being taken to improve the way in which we operate, to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce our emissions, and to be a significantly more environmentally friendly organization and friendly industry as well. So I believe this is a really important part. As you can see here, there are lots of different things, moving from standard vehicles to electric, to hybrid, self-generating vehicles that are coming through very quickly. I mean, the one common theme that we see, not just with physical aspects, but also digital technology, is that the technology is changing so quickly and improving so fast. The capacity for storage and power from batteries, it's all improving so that the new things are being enabled very, very quickly. So the hardest thing for most organizations is where to invest their money. What is the one that they're going to sink their sword into and say, this is where we draw the line and we're going to invest in this technology and this is what we're going to move forward on. And I don't, because there's so much variability going on throughout various industries and around the world, I don't think that we've reached that line yet, that people have decided what is the most efficient, most long-term viable solution to achieve. So as an organization, we believe that, and we've said, okay, then we need to do all of it, as much as possible of it, in manageable ways right now, learn for ourselves so that as we move forward, we would hopefully be able to choose the right technologies to adopt, the right strategies to implement. So just say there, so packaging, big thing in the industry, that's changing as well. We went through to VIPs many years ago, and phase change material that has stuck with us. But that's also beginning to change. There are new technologies coming out specifically in light of new treatments that are being brought to market. And again, I'll touch on that in just a bit, because I think this is, again, another area of innovation that is extremely important. Renewable energy sources, obviously, solar panels, wind energy, this is, becoming quite commonplace. But and also in terms of technology using on the inside of your facilities to make the most and take advantage of these renewable sources of energy. And then we've got lots of efficiencies, as I say, within distribution centers that drive benefits. And lastly, I think, and this isn't something that I think we should downplay, but it's the offsetting initiatives. Planting trees, re-energizing rivers, mangroves, forests. This is a really important part that I think we owe the environment, because we're not going to fix it entirely by just reducing what we do. We're moving too slowly for that. So if we can at least offset and improve parts of the environment that are not affected or have been affected that can be improved, regenerated, then that is also a major contribution. But this is a big focus for us as an organization. The other major innovation within clinical trials is cell and gene therapy, or within healthcare. Now this is moving at a tremendous rate, and I'm sure many people in this room that are in the industry are involved in it in one way or another, probably making a lot of money from very expensive movements of tissue samples that are being moved back and forth from specific countries. Most of this activity is happening in North Asia, which is quite to be anticipated because of the much further advancement they have in their healthcare systems. But it's moving at an incredible rate, and not just, I'm talking about the volumes and the number of studies that are being conducted, but also the type of studies that are being conducted are changing all the time. We've seen studies that can be cryogenic, deep frozen, chilled, and then you've got studies that have got a combination of materials all to be moved at the same time to the same places, even though you're using maybe 3 different packaging materials to manage the temperature of 3 different types of materials. This is a really complex environment. And the amount of money, and anybody here in the courier industry, and I know one gentleman right there, and another one over there at the middle table. But if you guys are working in these areas, you're making a lot of money from these shipments, very expensive shipments being treated with white gloves. And it should tell you something that people are spending so much money on these shipments. This is a treatment therapy that is absolutely here to stay. A lot of people are talking about whether or not it's going to be commercially viable. It doesn't matter, because the success rates are so high that on treatments of disease groups that don't have treatments today, that this will break through. And it will. And I think what we've seen now is that as it breaks through more on a autologous basis, we will see eventually the allogeneic solutions that will come through on broader mass treatments. These will change the cost elements for this type of treatment therapy, and therefore we'll also need to change the way in which we handle the movement of these products. And also a lot of the movements now are from Asia to Europe or US and then back again, because that's where the technology is. The labs with the latest capabilities to process these tissue samples and bring them back to be implanted into the patient, are overseas. But in time to come, those labs are being, and in fact, as we speak, those labs are being developed in Asia now. China's working on it, Korea and Japan are all working on it. So eventually these movements within markets will change. They'll become domestic movements. There'll be far bigger groups. Samples will be taken on a larger basis. But still, the intensity in terms of handling the samples is absolutely essential. You can only take, in some cases, a human sample once, and of that particular time and place. So after that, you have to do all the tests again, you have to reset everything, and then take another sample. So making mistakes in this space is really not something that would be very well entertained. Just 1 second. And finally, very specific to clinical trials, is an innovation that has really taken place because of need. Decentralization of trials and direct-to-patient models has been essential, and even more so when COVID hit. Already in Northern Hemisphere markets, the recruitment rates were slowing down. The retention rates on studies of patients was deteriorating, and a solution was needed. And decentralized direct-to-patient studies was the way forward. Of course, when COVID hit, it was perfect. It was a solution to get to patients that was there, really lying semi-dormant, because it's an expensive way of doing things. But when there's no other choice, of course, it becomes the solution of choice. There is talk of this in Asia, but quite frankly, when you've got over 3 billion people and you've still got hugely naive populations of patients, to revert to direct-to-patient, in my opinion, is unlikely because of the substantial costs. We're looking now at China that's exploding for clinical trial perspective, big population countries such as Korea and Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia reopening, and India, of course, that's been very, very subdued for a very long time, is now starting to look at the policies and processes they need to become, a big player in this industry once more. But you can see on the side there that recruitment is 4 months faster. The patient retention rates 95% higher. This is 95% of studies in direct-to-patient are higher retention rates than a normal study where the patient needs to go to the site. And patient participation. So with these sort of stats, you can understand why in the US, North America, and Western Europe, that this is being adopted. But like I say, whether or not that will be the case in Asia, I think will be a little bit different. So with these innovations that are coming through, my final few slides are really to talk about the future that we're looking at and the problems that we face and why do we have problems. And my view on this is the fact that we still operate in silos. And this is just an indicative fact of how businesses are set up. You've got sponsors, you've got CROs, you've got manufacturers, you've got logistics companies, supply chain individuals. You've got labs that products go to. There are data companies. And there is some integration, but quite frankly, there is very little in the real scheme of things. And that has all sorts of problems. And as I say on the side there, the lack of data integration and visibility is first and foremost issue. As things get more challenging, we are, it's our responsibility and certainly it becomes a competitive advantage if you can solve problems and deliver solutions that are more competitive, more sustainable, as I've mentioned previously, but also more viable and competitive for the customer. So that's a really essential part. Data, as we all know, is when you start dealing with patients, especially when you start looking at decentralized trials and direct-to-patients, you're talking about personal data. So personal data confidentiality becomes another issue. What do you do with the data you're given and the protocols required to ensure that you're not breaching confidentiality in any way? So you can be audited and to make sure that only the right people receive the data and that you manage the data and dispose of the data appropriately once the work is complete. But one of the very important areas in terms of moving forward is those analytical insights. If you can't see everything, it's very difficult to understand where can you improve, where can you make those critical decisions, maybe eliminating certain transactions or movements. But really understanding, where the problems lie and how to solve them. So this is an initiative which has been around some time now. It's a global consortium, as you can see here from the names at the bottom, and I'm going to aim to, there you go. Very big pharmaceutical companies are involved in this consortium. You've also got very big technology companies that are involved. You've also got global institutions. This is a really big initiative. And even with all of these names and momentum, it's really difficult to move it forward. But this is a consortium that's using blockchain technology, and I'm very proud to say that we are part of this, and part of our technology is part of the solution. But using blockchain technology, having a system that can capture the data end to end, right down to the very micro data, very granular information. Now, most of the focus at the moment from this consortium is really focusing on the product and the patient. They're trying to solve those aspects first. But it's only natural that eventually, when they solve that problem of making an investigational drug in a manufacturing lab, in a manufacturing unit, making sure that they're tracking those movements, where that product goes for packaging, how it's handled, or whether it be a CRO, CMO, distributor, they can see that. But more importantly, the patient data, the study design, who's getting, so all of these products being individually serialized, which patient is going to receive which shipment, and making sure that they can track that and then when it goes to that patient, that is endorsed so as to complete the blockchain. Eventually, that's going to cascade down to the logistics behind it, making sure that the movements are also being captured within there, and therefore it avoids any way of someone intervening into the supply chain, because you can't break a blockchain. You can't just jump in at the last mile, substitute a product or substitute with a counterfeit of some sort, because obviously the blockchain will not validate that movement, and it's very quickly identified as a false move. So it's very important. So why blockchain? Security and compliance, absolutely second to none. So there isn't other systems out there. I'm not saying this blockchain is easy to work with. And I know a lot of people talk about blockchain with cryptocurrencies. We're not talking cryptocurrencies here today. But the whole method, the ledgers that work behind a blockchain system can be used in many ways, and this is one of them. Trust and integrity of the system. You can't get everyone to buy in unless you've got a system that is absolutely foolproof and transparent to everybody along so they can see. So everybody acts as an owner of the data and is responsible for their part, but also responsible what happens before and after. So this is a really important part. But the most important part is the scalability of a solution. If you're going to work on a global basis and have it as an open source to be available to all parties that come along, then it has to be a scalable solution. So I'll finally leave you with, we have our own system that we are already trying out in Asia. This is on commercial product though, I would say. We would love to use it in clinical trials and also engage with the companies that we saw in that previous slide, because obviously they're great companies to work with. But at the moment, for clinical trials, it's really being used just for patients and products, and the product, the study design. But I think over time, our experience with this will hold us in good stead, that when it expands beyond these initial forays of pilots that are being conducted today, that there will be a solution that can be used end-to-end globally by all players, and have absolutely integral data for everyone to use. So that's it for me. I hope that's been a little bit informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you. Yeah, we'll open to the floor round. Are there any questions for Giuseppe? Or you can submit via the Mentimeter.
Thank you, Giuseppe, for that very informative presentation, and highlights the complexity of the challenges that you are facing. Clearly, you are sharing with us this consortium, which really will put together a lot of the common problems. Who is leading this, and where's the motivation for it to succeed? Because obviously it's not easy. And what is the role that you are playing, Zurich Pharma, in nurturing, motivating this, the success of this consortium?
Thanks, Joe, for that question. Yes, there is. So this was stemmed by some technology companies with pharmaceutical companies that were smart enough to realize the problem was larger than just a one-to-one relationship. So they created an institute, the Pharma Ledger Institute, which is fully staffed and paid for. So all the pharmaceutical companies you saw there, the technology companies, including ourselves, we pay to be part of this. So we contribute some of the technology because we were working on blockchain for some time. We've been working on counterfeit products in Asia for many, many years. I had a product many years ago called ZipCheck. I thought I liked the name, but it never caught on, unfortunately. So we've been looking at that problem for a very, very long time. So we happened to have some very clever guys that brought blockchain to us and showed us how to create this supply chain integrity check. Basically, it's a supply chain ledger. And for those people who don't know how blockchain works, and I certainly don't, I'm not an expert, and I'm about to probably put myself up ready to have my head chopped off. But it's every entry that goes in with a blockchain solution is effectively entered into a ledger, so that the next entry for that must relate to the previous one and to the next one. So there isn't a way of interjecting a product into a supply chain if the product has been, the shipment has been scanned within a blockchain ledger originally, and then is going to be scanned at the arrival point. You can't just suddenly arrive in and say scan this, because the labels that are there will not coincide with what should have been done within the ledger. So it's so that's where we stand, and we're pushing it forward because we believe it's the right thing to do. But quite frankly, when Asia's trying to do it, it is the tail wagging the dog. This is going to have to start in North America and Western Europe, because that's where all the big pharmaceutical headquarters are.
Thank you. We have one question on your active mobile app users. There are 110,000 of them. How does this work?
Yeah, so for our solution, we work with certain clients. We're working on smaller pilot projects. So very specifically, deviation of product, diverting of product away from where it's supposed to be, counterfeit product that comes into the region, and so where they have very sensitive products, we would create a blockchain supply chain for them so that we can manage it. And therefore, all the users, including in many cases the customers, would be part of that supply chain. So and using mobile technology is all that's required to be able to scan, certainly for end users. And it can go all the way to the patient to verify a product. For example, they receive a product, there's a code there, they'd scan it, and that would give them verification that this is a authentic product.
Any other questions from the floor? Because I think this question on integrity and safety of pharmaceuticals during transportation and storage, I think Giuseppe has also touched on that as well.
Yeah, I think I've covered the data part of the integrity and safety. I think the transportation and storage is something that I'm sure I'm teaching how to suck eggs here, because there's lots of logisticians in the room that know this already. But the facilities you run, the infrastructure you have, and most of all the processes and the people that run it are the most important aspects of any transportation or logistics supply chain. I used to, quick story, very short one. When I was younger, I used to be very protective of my business. It's just someone say they want to come and see my facility. I'd say, "Whoa, this is a competitor, or it could be a competitor. I'm not so sure." The reality is the facility itself and what it looks like is of no consequence whatsoever. If you don't have the right processes, the right culture, the right people, you never ever achieve that integrity within warehousing and logistics. And so, yeah, as an older man, and you've heard already how old I am, so that doesn't need to touch on that anymore. But that's where the real intelligence lies. Having said all of that, digitization and digitalization is changing that in many ways. AI is moving at a pace that most people can't even fathom, including myself. I still have never used ChatGPT. So who knows whether that would be the case going forward, because a lot of things will get automated. We're in the process of automating all of our facilities because of the nature of the quality and efficiency that can be gained from that. So yeah, a lot of things are changing all the time.
Thank you. There were a few other questions in the Menti about blockchain, but let's not put Giuseppe in the spot. I don't think he's the expert to answer those questions. Any last questions before we move on to the next panel? Okay, if not, thank you very much, Giuseppe.
Thank you.
Thank you.